Good morning, everybody. Glad to be back with you this morning. This morning, I'm going to take us back a little in time, not really very much time, about 5 months, to the Capitol uprising in America. And this is a blog I wrote at the time when I was trying to kind of fathom out what was happening in the world, and I've called it What in the World. And I share it with you this morning. So I've been following the events on CNN in America around the election and then the 6th of January uprising, which actually motivated this blog. Made me think, made me wonder where we were going in the world and what God's plan was for us, and if in fact there was one, because it was so appalling to watch what was going on in the news. I've been absolutely horrified by the footage of the onslaught on the buildings of the Capitol. And, for me, America was the archetype of democracy. And what does this carnage here in the US bring to mind on a larger scale? We know we're part of a greater whole. And so what happens to my American friends happens to me and to the people that I love and to you. And, it's not just the Capitol. I've just sort of honed in on this particular one that I thought was pretty awful. But look at India, overridden by COVID. And now the deadly black fungus, which is just awful. We saw it on CNN last night, people with this black fungus in their faces and in their sinuses. And it's life-threatening. And in Africa, in Ethiopia, in Burma, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in just Israel and Gaza, just there are quite a number of hotspots in Africa, in Yemen as well. There's this famine and this flooding and this ongoing political instability. So you look around you and you don't see much hope, and you have many questions. We cannot be deluded into thinking that the enormous fissure in the American society will not fracture like a spider's web across the world. And it is, isn't it? And even the cosmos, the universes. And that we will all be caught up in it in some way, like we've been caught up in COVID. Creation encompasses all of the cosmos. And what happens here on this tiny speck on the cosmic radar will have its ripple effect far and wide. While this is all well and good, I wonder what it means for us. There is no doubt that if one steps back and adopts a world view or even a cosmic view, that not much is working in our world. And that most of God's creation, and even the material and physical creations of man in the world, are in some form of decay. You often hear people talk about the new normal, but no one seems to take us further than that. Can someone take us closer to the edge of the precipice so that we can look out and beyond into the future at what awaits us? But no one seems to know. Most of the first part of Revelation to John tells us of the cosmic battle that precedes God's new and glorious creation. And we can see the remnants of that battle all around us today. The events of the 6th of January at the United States Capitol building gave us graphic and terrifying images of what humanity is capable of. I stood in the grip of disbelief and horror as I watched people attacking the keepers of the law, smashing people with flagpoles, beating people, surrounding them and chanting terrifying mob threats of death and persecution, smashing windows and buildings and targeting innocent, well-meaning people with the intent of capture and murder. And later on, I listened to the people like Nancy Pelosi, who was within an inch of her life hiding in the Senate chamber, and how absolutely terrified she was. She was reduced to tears in her speech in the Senate chamber afterwards. I have lived in South Africa all my life, and that's been quite a long life so far. And these images aren't foreign to me. They wouldn't be foreign to us. They're a way of life for us here. And we have all lived through the trauma and transition of apartheid and all the hatred and infighting, political corruption that has followed in its wake and brought our country to its knees. But America, for me as a South African, and perhaps as a white South African, who has always needed an icon of hope and peace, falling into the trenches of violence, betrayal, and hatred. What was my bastion of hope? It lay in pieces on the ground. America has always been that light of hope for me. It was a very violent, emotional, and psychological shock. It was vicarious trauma, complicated by the reawakening of previous trauma. The weight of sadness and grief sat on my chest like an elephant, sucking the life-giving oxygen from me. Oxygen seems to be a thing that we can't rely on too much nowadays. And yet, it supports life on Earth. I was unbalanced on every level and knocked to the floor next to the shreds of the American peace and hope. My remains of my bastion of hope lying all around me. This was now a truly changed world, but it wasn't the new normal. A phrase that I do wish folk would stop using, because without a vision of what it is meaningless and frightening. And then, like someone lighting a candle within me, I remembered that the hope of Christ is not of this world, and so it can never be destroyed. The hope of Christ lives in God's world, and our hearts should live in God's world. I remember that after the devastation and human carnage of God's vengeance on the unrighteousness was completed in the revelation to John, that there was a new creation. Certainly nothing normal, but mind-boggling, beautiful, with a light that never can go out, streaming from beautiful light reflecting stones. There will never be night again, because God's normal is incomparable to anything we have ever encountered or ever will. It is more wonderful, more humane, infused with love, grace, mercy, and compassion It's like swimming in an endless sea of God's eternal blessing. I will wait for that in the everlasting hope. Whether it happens in this world or when I swirl and dance in everlasting grace of God's kingdom, there is no new normal. There is only God's incomparable beauty, and in dance, a dance of ineffable love, a walk on the wild side, wider and more mysterious and enchanting than you have ever known. Instead of taking your breath away, it will fill your heart, mind, body, and soul with the love of God to the extent that it will overflow into the entire cosmos, which will be filled with misty wisps of light. So in closing, I say to you, embrace God. Embrace the hope that lives in His Son, Jesus Christ. Hold love, the love of God, the pure, unbounded love of God, here in your heart. Never let it go. It is always with us, and we can rely on God in a way that we can't rely on man in the world. So never fear. God is always with us. His hope bubbles like an endless spring within us and will sustain us. And we know, because we are told so often in the scriptures, that He will never leave us. I hope you enjoy the song. It's called Still. When the oceans rise and thunders roar, I will soar with you above the storm. Father, you are King over the earth, and I will be still and know you are God. Many rich blessings to you all. Much love. See you next week. Bye-bye.